All right, it's 32 now, so I'll get started and people can join as I'm talking. Thank you for all coming along today. So this event is all around the power of movement in promoting young people's mental resilience, and this is an event that's been co-designed between all the active partnerships in the east of England. So all our logos are on that screen there. I'm Tom Horey from the Heart Sport and Physical Activity Partnership, and I'm just the spokesperson for all the active partnerships today. But hopefully you have the chance to speak to some of our other colleagues from the other active partnerships when we move on to the breakout rooms. Um, and today is all about kind of having discussions around building mental resilience in young people, and there'll be opportunities to learn from some of our speakers today, but then also to input your own thoughts and kind of your own learnings and share that later on within the session. So before we get going, just a quick bit of housekeeping. As I mentioned at the start, if you would be able to remain muted throughout the initial bit of the webinar, that'd be great. There will be the opportunity later on to input ideas and talk, and we'd very much encourage you when we go into breakout rooms to come off mute and input them. But during the presentations, if you could remain muted, that'd be appreciated. Just one thing around accessibility, if you want to use live captions, that is an option that is available through Microsoft Teams, and that image on the screen there should explain how you do that. So by clicking more, and then you can click down to language and speech settings and click on those captions. So if that is an accessibility function that you need, hopefully you'll be able to use that. We'd encourage questions throughout. Hopefully we'll have time for questions after each section of the presentations. So use the Q&A functions for questions as they come to you, and hopefully we'll get time to fit them in. And if we don't have time within the kind of the event, we'll make sure at least we get those answered and circulated after. I'd also encourage you to use the chat throughout the initial part of the webinar, kind of introduce who you are, what county you're from, what you hope to get out of today. I'd encourage you to use the chat through that. And then the last thing to say is this webinar will be recorded and distributed to those that have registered, but that won't include the discussions in the breakout rooms. That'll only be the main content of the webinar rather than those discussions. So don't have to worry about that being recorded in terms of what you say within those sections. So before I hand over, just going to quickly refresh on the agenda. So the welcome and housekeeping, that's been done, but then we're going to have a look at the national perspective. So we're joined by colleagues from the Active Partnerships National Organisation as well as Sport England, and they're going to outline some of the kind of what we mean by mental resilience and physical activity, and some of the insights around how this can actually benefit the well-being of young people. We'll then be joined by Stormbreak, who will be giving a presentation around their programme and how they use that to build young people's mental resilience. And then we'll also be joined by Mindfulness, Mindfulness, who are going to talk about some of the strategies for supporting anxious young people. After that, we'll go into our first breakout room, which is going to be mixed groups, so a mix of different people from different counties, where we're going to look at some of the challenges you shared with us when you signed up to the event, but it's going to be a real focus on how we can overcome those and share learning from each other to how we take that forward and overcome some of those challenges. And then finally, the last breakout room will all be around next steps, and that'll be in our own counties, discussing how we take the learning from the event forward and kind of progress this work. So that's the agenda, but without further ado, I think it's best to hand over to our first presenter, which is Helen Pring from the Active Partnerships National Organisation. So Helen, I'll pass over to you.
Perfect, thanks, Tom. Appreciate that. Tom, can you see my slides?
Yeah, I can see them. Thanks.
Amazing, perfect, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Just welcome to the session today. It's really delightful just to be able to come and present and just give a bit of a national overview and perspective. I'm just going to chat for sort of between 5 and 10 minutes, just about touching on CYP and mental health, some of the current statistics and how we can support them, and you know, why there's a focus from so many different areas about supporting children with mental health. So I'm a director of relationships for the national team, and part of my overview is to look at children and young people and support the work that our local active partnerships are doing with children and young people. We obviously know that post-pandemic, post the COVID pandemic, we have seen huge numbers of referrals for children with mental health. And it's really important that actually we understand that 50% of mental health problems are already established by the age of 14. The referrals since COVID, they're coming in at around about, and this is from the National Office for National Academy, sorry, for Social Prescribing, they're coming in around about 120,000 referrals a month, which is a 250% increase in referrals for children's mental health. We know that 80% of these referrals, which are coming in to organisations and to organisations which support sort of the mental health of children and young people, 80% of these children don't actually belong to part of a group or a club, and they really do lack connectiveness with their communities, with their peers. And how can sport and physical activity really sort of support the resilience of a child, but also ensure that they are connected into their local community to support their mental health as well. We know that there are specialist services designed out there to support these children and young people, for example, CAMHS, but they have long waiting times and they really have high thresholds for treatment, and the thresholds seem to be going up and up every year. So actually, how can we adopt early intervention, which starts within the primary school setting or in the primary school age group, to support children and young people? We know that resilience is really important. We know that resilience actually, it's the ability to adapt, to cope from adversity. And we know that sport, physical activity, dance and exploration really supports the resilience of a child. It really helps them feel connected. It really helps them feel empowered for our children, young people. And actually, when we think about the 80% of children who don't feel connected to their communities, we know that sport and physical activity can help that connection, can increase that social bonding. And that's why it's really, really important that we promote physical activity and sport within every sort of setting. One way of doing this, and one way of supporting a child who perhaps is suffering from their mental health, is through social prescribing. And social prescribing is a key component of universalized, sort of the universal personal care. It's an approach that really connects the child to activities, to the groups, to services within their local area. But in order for social prescribing to work, it must be sort of individualised, and it must come with youth voice at the heart of what they do. Because actually, when we look at social prescribing as a form of support for a child or a young person, what we want them to do is look at physical literacy, which I'll come on to in a minute, which is about empowering positive relationships. Because we know that social prescribing, it can really lead to improvements in mental health, and it can lead to improvements within physical well-being, which in turn enables the child or young person to build their resilience, to support their work, and to lead really healthy, active and confident lives. So if we have that personalised approach, it really goes hand in hand with physical literacy. And physical literacy, as you can see here, it was developed, the recent definition was developed in hand with Sport England. And it is the relationship, or our relationship, with movement and physical activity throughout our life. And it's important when we think about every opportunity that a child gets to experience physical activity, sport and movement, we need to look at their positive experiences that they have within this, and how positive experiences within the setting of physical activity can help build resilience, can help support the child to become more able to cope with life, able to cope with adversity. And when we look at physical literacy, we see it, the modern day physical literacy, we understand that sort of Dr. Margaret Whitehead is seen as the founder of this physical literacy as we understand it today. And children with higher levels of physical literacy are more likely to be happier, and they're more resilient, and they're twice as likely to engage in sport and physical activity. And this is taken from the Active Lives survey. And improving physical literacy, it's one of the key strands of active partnerships, but it's also a key strand within Sport England's Uniting the Movement strategy. So it's such a priority for everybody that actually we give positive experiences to children, young people in every sporting and physical activity opportunity. And we know that our physical literacy, our relationship with sport and physical activity changes throughout our life course. I think if you think back to perhaps when you were 5, it's quite different to when you were 15, and it's quite different to how you are now. So think about those positive experiences that you might have received. And then when we promote sport and physical activity for our children, young people, especially those who have potentially are suffering with their mental health, how can we make sure that they are really positive so that they have a lifelong enjoyment with physical activity? And we know that increasing, and this is the theory of change which is developed by Sport England, we know that increasing physical activity levels is really complex, especially when trying to motivate people who have multiple inequalities. And we've got to focus on creating meaningful and positive experiences for everybody. And this physical literacy, it really does provide this framework for us to do that. And a simple opportunity to move, to play, to enjoy really can change a child's path, and it can change their sort of their some of their outcomes within their life. And how can we move, connect, think and feel during movement and physical activity? It plays a crucial role in shaping our physical activity. And the more that we are physically active, and the more that we have positive outcomes, the increase in our capabilities regarding physical activity, sport and movement. So you can see here on the right hand side of the screen why it's important. In the middle, it's the goal. And at the beginning, on the left-hand side of the screen, are the capabilities and outcomes within the physical literacy. So when we think about developing our resilience, our mental resilience with children and young people, we need to also connect it to physical literacy as well. And how can we create these positive experiences? And then when we look back to the current statistics, we need to think about, okay, so the primary setting, primary school age group are perhaps the main setting to ensure that they are on that positive journey with sport and physical activity, because we know the benefits and outcomes. I just wanted to touch on the NHS's healthcare inequalities for children and young people. So this is the core 20+5 model. And actually what I wanted to touch on is just on the right hand side of the screen. Point 5 is looking at the mental health, and their focus is in improving access rates to children and young people for mental health services from 0 to 17 years of age. And it's for certain sort of groups, ethnic groups, age, genders, and those living within deprivation. So it's a key focus for the NHS is to actually reduce the waiting times, reduce the list in order to access support. But how can we as active partnerships, how can we within our localities support those children, young people who are perhaps on that journey to needing greater support within focusing on their mental health, and how can we promote physical activity in order to do this? And then one way, just finally, before I hand over, just one way is looking at the 5 ways to wellbeing. So this was developed by NEF as a result of the commission by Foresight, which is a government futures think tank. And actually, this is something that we can promote for every child and young person. It's their 5 ways to wellbeing, which they can really take hold of and actually incorporate it into their daily life. And what's fantastic is the second one is about being active. Can we get outside? Can we promote engaging in regular physical activity to support their mental health? And as I say, these are actions which can be incorporated into their daily life, which we can promote at primary, at any sort of setting, within the community setting or within the school setting. How can we continuously do this so that actually we're supporting the mental health and physical health of our children and young people? So that was just a very quick sort of whistle-stop tour about some of the statistics, why it's important, linking to physical literacy, understanding sort of the NHS's focus going forwards, and then just some of a key way that we can support going forwards as well through the 5 ways to wellbeing. I am now going to hand over to Liz Aitken from Sport England, who is going to go into a little bit more detail on some of these areas. So I'm going to stop presenting and hand over to Liz.
Thanks, Helen. I will start sharing. Can I just check, Tom, can everyone see that?
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Liz Aitken. I'm working the Children and Young People Policy team at Sport England. I'm going to follow on from what Helen has just spoken to you about by talking through some of the evidence and data that we have at Sport England and also from other sources, which really reinforces the positive role of physical activity in supporting children and young people's mental resilience and their well-being.
Yeah, no, we need to put our hands up because we can't see it.
Oh, so I could just hear someone say they can't see it.
Yeah, we can't see it. Sorry, it's just saying we can't display the content.
Is anyone else having issues with that at all?
We can see it fine at our end, Tom, at the moment. So I'm not sure if other attendees are struggling. Maybe put in the chat if you're not.
Most people in the chat can see it.
Yeah, no, there's a few that are popping up now on the chat saying they can't.
Shall I stop sharing and share again?
Yeah, sometimes it's temperamental, isn't it, on Teams?
Yeah, maybe do that. Most can see it, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Maybe try it and reshare. But if not, you might have to try and do your best to follow without slides. Most people seem to be able to see it fine.
Yeah.
Shall I carry on or?
Yeah, I think carry on, Liz.
Sure.
Yeah, you can see it now, guys. Yeah, cool.
Okay. Apologies if anyone can't, and we'll definitely share these afterwards. So yeah, I'm just going to follow on from Helen by taking you through some of the evidence and data and insights that we've got. So I've got a few slides to start with that is just going to show the data that we have from our latest Children and Young People Active Lives survey, which was taken from the academic year 2023 to 2024. It's worth saying at the start, there's generally less data on children and young people, especially the younger primary age around their mental health and well-being, particularly when we compare this to adults. So today I'm going to share with you some secondary age data as well. And I'm sure this is for many reasons that you'll be aware of around ethics, data protection, and the types of questions that we can ask young people, particularly the younger age around primary school, that they'll be able to understand and respond to. So I just wanted to sort of flag that to start with. So I think it's always important to start with the challenge that we face and that I know collectively we're all working together to address. And that is that nationally, just 48% of children and young people are meeting the Chief Medical Officer guidelines of an average of 60 minutes or more a day. And you'll see from this slide that this figure has remained fairly unchanged over recent years from 2018 through to 2024. So not only do we need to help children to be more active for their physical health, but we know we need to support them more to be active because of the broader wellbeing benefits that it brings. Our research shows that enjoyment is the single biggest driver of activity levels, that only 49% of children and young people agree that they strongly agree that they enjoy being active. So we've got a huge enjoyment gap that needs addressing if we are to support young people to be more active. And as Helen said, the experiences that we offer must be positive for them all, or we'll have effectively the opposite effect and the wellbeing benefits just won't be realised for those young people. But positively, the latest Active Lives data does continue to back up what many of us here today do believe, that sport, physical activity and movement can really transform and improve young people's lives. And our data shows that there is a positive association between levels of engagement in sport and physical activity and levels of mental well-being. And this is shown on the graphic on the left-hand side. And in the Active Lives survey for children, we measure this through the question, how happy did you feel yesterday? And they score their answers out of 10. So you can see that those are most active have a score of 7 out of 10, compared to the score of 6.6 of those young people who are least active. And for adults, the same is true. And there's a positive association between the two. And you can see that on the graphic on the right-hand side. Over the last 2 years, we haven't seen a change in these scores, but we do know that happiness scores are down over the last 6 years, and girls have seen a greater drop than boys. But for teenagers, those aged 13 to 16, we haven't seen a drop. And there's many different factors that could be affecting this drop in happiness, including the pandemic, and we are seeing long-lasting effects from that, as I'm sure a lot of you are seeing on the ground as well. Another indicator linked to resilience is what we term and measure individual development. And this is presented in our Active Lives data by the proportion of children and young people who strongly agree that they keep trying when things are difficult. As with happiness, we do see a positive association between levels of activity and levels of individual development. And similarly to happiness, the change story is the same as we saw last year, with individual development levels remaining unchanged over the last 3 years, but they are down over the last 6 years. And we've seen the largest drops in individual development across ages 9 to 13-year-olds and girls in particular. We also know that active young people have lower rates of loneliness, another contributor to supporting children and young people's resilience. And on average, those children and young people that report being less lonely also report being happier. So the data that we've got from Active Lives does show us the positive association between being active and happiness and individual development. But both of these outcome markers fell during the pandemic and do remain down. So, something that we really need to continue to tackle and focus on. And I just wanted to share this slide to particularly draw attention to the question we asked children about understanding that exercise and sport is good for them, which is the top green line on the graph, as we also see an emerging downward trend here, down to 63% from 68% of children and young people understanding why it is good for them to be active. So if we want to build children and young people's resilience, one way we need to do this is to really support them to understand why being active is good for them, and then helping them to be active. So these last few slides that I've shown were taken from our Active Lives survey. And beyond this, there are other sources of data that support the connection between physical activity and resilience. And I'm just going to share a few more of those now. But I think what this shows is that collectively across all of the data and insights that exists, it really strengthens the evidence base that we have to promote physical activity. Just as a warning, the next few slides are quite data and text heavy. I'm not going to go through it all, but it was really so that you can read them in your own time afterwards and know where to follow up if you want to look at other sources of data. So the first source of data that I wanted to share that highlights the benefits of children and young people being active is from Be Well, which was established in Greater Manchester and is a youth-centred programme that is making the well-being of young people everybody's business. They're really explicit together with the partners they work with that they listen to the voices of young people, they act together for change, and they celebrate young people's well-being. It's a collaboration between many partners, including the University of Manchester, Anna Freud, and the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. And essentially, it's a survey that's delivered annually in schools to find out what affects young people's well-being and what can be done to improve it. Since 2021, they've heard from the voices of about 100,000 young people from 198 secondary schools across Greater Manchester. And I've just pulled out a few points from the research. There's a lot more that sits behind this that you can read, where they've looked at how being active is associated with better social outcomes, specifically linked to mental well-being and resilience. Firstly, they found that increasing physical activity minutes can have significant benefits for overall social outcomes, including physical health, social connection and friendships, although they do see some differences for boys and girls. By increasing the number of days that young people participate in sports outside of school, this is associated with better social outcomes. And they found that just 1 minute of additional physical activity per week over a year could increase life satisfaction. And the last point shows that participation in sports outside of school also has a really positive impact on those young people pursuing further education, and therefore also an impact on lifetime earnings. Apologies, I think this slide is probably a little blurry, but this just shows some of the insights that the Youth Sport Trust have collated from different sources, and you can find this on their website. And these range from physical activity being associated with reduced behavioural and emotional difficulties in adolescence, physical activity improving young people's working memory, the positive effects of playing in organised group sports, and parents feeling that physical activity and sport really helps their children's mental well-being. It's worth having a look on the Youth Sport Trust website if you want to find out a bit more. They've got lots of insights and resources that might be useful and could be helpful for you. And this slide just shows a few other data sources and studies that help to evidence the positive connection. And just looking at that top one piece of research found that sports participation positively predicts self-belief and what they term mental toughness. And they found this effect was greater for girls than boys. There's insights from Girl Guiding that shows that playing team sports can help build girls' confidence. And Play England have also found that children who regularly play out in their street had significantly higher levels of well-being during childhood, as well as better mental health into adulthood. And as I mentioned just before on the last slide from the Be Well data, there is evidence out there that shows the impact of being active on future life skills and employability. We know that sport and physical activity can help young people develop and then transfer key skills needed throughout life, such as teamwork, resilience, and self-discipline. So just a few other sources of data there that you, if you want to dig into it afterwards, you can, and I've put kind of the source of those. And finally, I just wanted to highlight a piece of research that we published in October last year, which focused on mental health conditions as opposed to more general well-being, but it might be of interest to you if you want to look at afterwards. So this was an independent scoping review that we commissioned by Edge Hill University, and it did a review of all the international evidence that had been published between 2004 and 2024. And the review looked at the use of sport and physical activity interventions for children and young people with a diagnosed mental health condition, as well as those who are waiting on a mental health treatment pathway. And this was diagnosed by a GP or a mental health specialist. And we wanted to look at this particularly because there is a lack of data in this space as compared to adults. And because of this, there were some limitations to the data that could be used in the evidence review, but we're really confident in the conclusions that were drawn following it. So Edge Hill University concluded that there was strong and consistent evidence that sport and physical activity interventions had positive effects on the diagnosed mental health problems of children and young people. So this does provide us with a really powerful message that we can use to align particularly sport and physical activity into the health agenda for children and young people. As well as the findings, the report also summarised some recommendations for practice. So if you're delivering on the ground, recommendations for policy funders and commissioners, and recommendations for future research in this area. We recorded a webinar with Edge Hill University who talked through the whole review and the results, and that's on our website, along with some assets that we've created so that organisations can use the evidence to influence their own partners locally to show the benefits of physical activity for children and young people with a diagnosed condition. So if you'd like to find out more, please do take a look at our website. I'll put a link in the chat after this so that you can find it easily. So apologies, that's been quite data heavy. It's not always the most interesting part of the day, but I hope it's been useful just to recap on the data and insights and just to really show that there is a lot out there that really does show the important role that being active, does play for children and young people and their mental well-being. So I will stop there and hand back to Tom, maybe.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Liz, and thank you, Helen. I think that's done a really good job of setting the scene for what we're talking about today. And most impressively, it was perfectly to the allotted time that we gave you and perfectly finished at 10, so I couldn't have done that better. I think there were some really key takeaways from there for both of your presentations that people can take, as well as some of the evidence for what we're all doing. Now I'm going to pass over to Martin Yellin from Stormbreak, who's going to do a presentation all around their programme of work. And just a reminder, if you do have any questions for any of our speakers today, you can put them in the Q&A box. But Martin, I'll pass over to you if you're here.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. I hope everyone can hear me. I haven't shared my screen yet, so I'm just about to give that a whirl. So let's see if that also works. Can you just confirm if you can see the screen?
I
we
can.
Good? You can, yeah. Great, okay. And still?
Yeah.
Excellent. Right, I'll crack on. And I'm feeling slightly under pressure because of that time as well, but I'll do my best. Both Helen and Liz stuck to it really well. I'm here from a charity called Stormbreak. My background's actually in education and behaviour change, where I did a lot of work on emotional behaviours and physical activity at Loughborough University when I was there a gazillion years ago in the lecturing team in 2001 and 2002. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the work we do at Stormbreak. I'm not going to go over this because I think Helen and Liz have said a fantastic intro to why we know that physical activity works. What I am going to do is try and dig in some of the detail about what we do at Stormbreak, particularly how in the last 7 or 8 years we've really worked together with local people and local communities to design and implement movement for mental health in children and young people at a prevention and early intervention level. And we do that through healthcare with NHS. We're currently delivering some PINS neurodiversity programs with partnerships in public health and in the NHS. We also deliver early intervention programs together with primary educators, and it's great to see some of those partners already on the call. Jill at Be Active Beds has been a long-term supporter of some of the work we do. And then we also do some focused, targeted, more specialist work in social care. And I'll talk a little bit about some of that with the work that we do with children in care. Very quickly, Thomas asked me to talk specifically about one element of what we do, and that's resilience. And, when we first designed Stormbreak, a part of that was born out of a frustration of resilience being an important domain, which was tagged on to the benefits of taking part in sport and physical activity, but without any real focus or understanding for what it really meant. So we spent considerable time working with young people and professionals and practitioners to really understand what does resilience mean and how in our practice can we deliver physical activity, sport and movement where resilience is a real focus. So super quickly, and I'm not going to ask you to do anything other than look at the questions. What does being resilient mean to you? Have a quick think about that. Perhaps think about a time where you felt resilient. Maybe think about a time when you felt less resilient. Just to you personally. And then what about in your work or in the context within which you work? What does resilience mean in that context? And is that different? When we designed Stormbreak, we wanted to use movement specifically for mental health. And so we included resilience as a domain of focus. Now we have 5 of them, and I appreciate that they're all interrelated and it's complex in the ways in which these different domains of mental health and well-being interact with each other. They're not standalone, but nonetheless, in terms of structure of implementation, it gives people something really clear to focus on when they deliver sessions. So when they deliver a session, we would talk about this is designed to support children's resilience. Right, so I want to talk about how we do that more specifically. When you do Stormbreak, actually we count the number of sessions that are delivered according to those concepts, and this is this year. So the number of resilience sessions delivered in primary education in 2024 was just over 235,000. So you can see where in some cases it's children that choose they want to do resilience sessions. In other cases, it's a teacher or a pastoral care worker or an ELSA worker. Right, let's look a little bit in more detail. Now, again, I've got some links, but I'm not going to show you these videos. Hopefully afterwards, Tom's going to share them with you so that you can get a good feeling for how we really dig into what resilience really means. This is Victoria. She's a CAMHS nurse. She's a part of our team, and she's built some of the resilience content with us. Let's just look at some definitions of resilience specifically for us. Now, Liz, I'm glad you said previously that your slides were sometimes text heavy. Again, Some of these are got a little bit of copy on, but I've included it so that when the deck's shared with you, you've got it for your use, right? So I asked you previously, what does resilience mean? And for us, resilience means, and this is very important, how you adapt personally, perhaps in the face of challenging personal and situational circumstances. And we want to encourage children to achieve a variety of quite difficult things. When I look at these things, I'm not sure I do these very well. I'm 53. Some of these things I really struggle with. And so it's normal and it's okay when working with children to have to carefully work through these things. Resilience isn't something that happens quickly. It's definitely not something that happens immediately or in one particular way. It's complicated, and the situations in which children are surrounded must all be taken into context when we're delivering resilience-focused sessions. For example, look at the penultimate point: achieve composure and adaptability during stressful situations. I don't know about you, but I still find that difficult. This is a hard thing for children to achieve, particularly when they are facing challenging emotional situations themselves. This is a much better model, and some of this stuff we use in our coaching and teaching with trusted adults that work with children and young people. So, for example, in our programs, we'll support pastoral care workers, social prescribers, family link workers, children's wellbeing practitioners to say, how do you actually use movement in your day-to-day to support families with children who are starting to struggle? And this is a good model that we like to talk about, and it's the roots of a tree, and how resilience is in fact being strong when you need to bend. All right, so when you need to bend, you can be stronger. On our website, we have a specific video about resilience. It's 90 seconds long. Some of you may have seen it. I'm going to leave it again so that you can watch it. So I will scroll through it, but this is a video voiced by a child that we use a lot around how to talk about resilience with children and young people. Again, I'll skip past it so that you can see it. And these are some of the important definitions that we use when talking about resilience. I'm going into quite a lot of detail here because I think it's really important that when you work with a service provider or you talk about, as we heard from Helen, social prescription, or you're working with other services within your areas, that they really understand how resilience can be supported through physical activity and movement. Not all of those experiences within sport and physical activity are positive. And Liz mentioned, and Helen both mentioned, the impact of positive relationships and positive experiences on children. For many people we work with, that's not been the case with physical activity, sport and movement. So we have to unpack some of those misconceptions. And this is really important about resilience. So knowing things can be out of control and knowing that that's okay, but knowing that they can keep going and knowing that they can build tenacity, coping strategies, perseverance to be able to bend when things don't go well. Now, perhaps that's very different to the initial question I asked you. Perhaps you thought resilience was about grit and determination and character building. But actually, real resilience is about being agile and being flexible and understanding that when something comes along that's challenging for you, you can build strategies to help you do that. Now, specifically, one of our programs is around working with children in care. Now, those children often land in complex placements because of challenging situations. We've done a lot of work listening to the voices of children in care about what resilience means for them. And it's taught me a significant amount about how children in care cope and demonstrate their own resilience. And it's very different, perhaps, to my experiences of being resilient in sport. And here's a couple of examples. Enduring and understanding disappointment and frustration. Parental visits with biological parents for children in care can often cause disappointment and frustration and be really challenging. And so putting in resilience-focused strategies through movement and mental health, sorry if you can hear an alarm going off in the background, hope I'm not about to be evacuated, right, is really important for those children. And we've demonstrated ways in which simple movement can help enhance placement stability for children in care, because it can improve their perseverance. It can improve their being resourceful, courageous, persistent, and determined. So a specific storm break to do with resilience is this one. It's called Glitter Jar, and this is Beth. I'm not going to play it, but it will be on the deck, so you can go back and have a look at it and perhaps use it in any practice. This is all about understanding how you feel when your feelings change and using movement as your anchor to orientate those feelings and emotions. You'll notice we're very purposeful with that language. So I want to dig in a little bit more to some of that language in this particular exercise. So this is the glitter jar. You shake the glitter jar. Some of you may have seen it. When you shake it, it can elicit certain feelings that you can connect to. So we'll talk about those feelings. In all storm breaks, we integrate therapeutic conversation with physical activity and movement, and we ask curious and compassionate questions. And that's really important, and it might be a departure from how you traditionally think of resilience in sport. An example could be a child falls over. In sports coaching, I'm traditionally PE trained, albeit 100 years ago. I would have said, right, get up, let's keep going. And that might be a traditional view of resilience. In fact, what we need in that situation is compassion and curious questioning and validation of that child's experience. And that's what boosts their resilience. Okay, so when you feel wobbly, a young child feels wobbly, they experience big feelings cause big emotions. When you're more resilient, you have strategies to help you deal with those emotions. So we might say things like, it's okay, instead of, let's do this in a particular technical way with a particular focus. We will show compassion and curiosity and go, tell me what happened. Hey, it's okay to feel like that. It's okay when things don't work. An example in our children in care program might be, how do we use movement to help a child whose biological parent has not turned up for a scheduled visit? Really important to that child. Or what about a withdrawal that child experienced when they have had a visit from their biological parent? We're also starting some work with women in prisons and how they interact with their children and young people, and how movement can be used in difficult and challenging contexts. Right. So when you're ready, let's try again. Right. Examples of things you might say to children and young people. And we know through our work with a lot of active partnerships, but also within healthcare, within the NHS, that when doing a short period of movement targeted specifically at mental health, and in some of these examples, we've been delving deeper into resilience and what that really means. These are some of the benefits that we see. Children find it easier to manage emotionally and socially challenging days. This is really important, particularly for those children who are showing early signs of struggle. So integrating an approach in a meaningful way to those children on the ground helps them build coping skills. When you've got better coping skills, you're more resilient. We can see this is an example that we do from our research with primary schools, and this is a 4-year piece of work. Nearly 90% of children find it easier to manage their emotionally and socially challenging days. These are the concepts that we'll work within. Finally, this is Kai's Stormbreak story. And again, I'm not going to go through it with you, but it tells the story of how movement for mental health, with the specifics of the things we've mentioned today, are used with one case study example. That link will be on the deck that we will share. That is it from me. I'm really sorry, Thomas. That's like about 60 seconds run over. But there you go, all done. If you do want to get in touch with me, there's my contact details. There's a ton of free resources on the Stormbreak website. Please feel free to dig in. I'll be delighted to answer any questions that any of you have in the future. Hope that's helped.
No need to apologise, Martin. That was really insightful. Really useful, some practical tips as well for people to take away. And I definitely recommend people can go and visit the Stormbreak website. There's loads of resources on there, and also you can find out more about those programs that Martin touched on within his presentation. So thank you for that. That was really useful. I'm going to move on to our last presentation now, which is Abby. I believe the slides are being shared by Luke and Sean, which I can now see. But happy to hand over to Abby, who's going to give her presentation now.
Hi everyone, I'm Abby. I work for Mini Me Mindfulness, and there's a lot of things that Martin was saying that resonated with me and how I am with the children that I work with. And it's lovely to hear that there's so many of us doing these wonderful things with the children. It sounds great, the Stormbreak, Martin. So I'm not the traditional sports person, as in I don't go in and do tennis or, you know, though I go in and I do playful learning, I guess. I work with more anxious children in small groups rather than big groups of children doing lots and lots of movement. So if we go to the next slide. So Mini Me Mindfulness, we work with children from 3, believe it or not, to 13. And I guess what I would say is we're kind of the coaching with that sports coach. We are teaching them the mindset of a sports person. So the resilience is there. We talk about endorphins. We talk about vision and gratitude. So we teach them superpowers, and each week they learn a different superpower, and they create a toolkit of superpowers that then help them to become resilient with all of their things that happen in life. We have little Annie and Oscar, you can see there are kind of characters that we use with the children. Next slide, please. So just very quickly, my background, I'm actually a qualified school teacher and yoga teacher. I was very much into the pastoral side of things at school. And then a couple of years ago, I bought Mini Me Mindfulness as a franchise, and already I've worked with 2,000 children. And just recently, we've increased the age to 13 because we found the gap, the transitional gap, and I'm sure you all feel the same. Going from primary to secondary is a very big step for a lot of our children, and it's one that they need that extra support, I believe. Next slide, please. So I was very lucky. Last year, I got in touch with the Essex Activate, and we had some funding for my area. And with that funding, we've been able to work with children for free. So accessing children that wouldn't be able to take part in my classes otherwise. So I work in 5 schools with very small groups of 10 children, and I also work in the community with the older sort of transitional age as well, and again, people that wouldn't have accessed the sessions had it not been for this free funding. I've got children that walk for like 40 minutes to get to the class, they don't have cars, that, you know, we are talking some deprived children as well. So it's been a pleasure to be able to offer this service that otherwise wouldn't have been used. Next slide, please. So anxiety, we all have experiences with the young children, and I'm sure you will feel the same with your settings and the children you work with. For me, the biggest challenges have been, firstly, getting the children in the door. I'm lucky that the parents have all put their names down for them, so the parents are already on their side. But I found that I have had to spend the first 2-3 sessions just getting an attachment with the children, which I'm sure you've all found in your settings too, but particularly these highly anxious children. And some children with their anxiety have displayed behaviours of shyness, and some have been extroverted, and it's being able to balance how I react to that and not judge that. That can be tricky sometimes, especially when the children are embarrassed. I'm sure you've experienced lots of them telling jokes and playing up, and just being able to control that environment with so many different personality types. And being a good listener, I guess, is something that we're all probably very good at with our young children that have anxiety, and just not judging that situation, just making that safe place for them. So for me, the first few sessions haven't been sports focused, they've been attachment focused, I guess, which would make sense with the type of children that we're working with. Next slide, please. And again. So I was really lucky. Locally, we have a wellbeing hub which supports all of our community. I'm hoping that you all have something wonderful like that in your local towns. It's a free place for people to go, and that's where I do 2 of my sessions with the younger children from years 6 to years 8. So as you can see, it's a very calm, safe place. So straight away, the children are coming in and feeling relaxed. Another wonderful thing about this is that just behind the curtain, it's a lounge where their adults can stay. And for some of the children, even though they're year 6, 7 and 8, have wanted that their parent to be there to feel safe, but their parent wants them to be able to take part without them being part of it, if that makes sense. So that's been really helpful, because some of these children wouldn't have stayed if their parent wasn't nearby, and because their attachment with their parents is very strong. Yeah, this is us meditating, because that's what we do, meditate every single week, as part of taking notice, which was the what we talked about earlier, those 5 elements of good well-being. And I feel like we incorporate all of those within our sessions. Oh yeah, one thing I will say, actually, we do have an all-girl group, and that was interesting, because when Sian came along to visit, that there is a dynamic, a different dynamic between my mixed group and the girls group, and I do feel like some of the girls really needed a one-sex group, and that's something I consider in my groups, and probably you will feel the same. Some children mix easily and some not so much. The other part of the funding, I have actually been placed in schools, which has been really beneficial. I'm sure lots of you probably work within the school setting. The best thing about this, I feel, is that the professionals, the teachers, the pastoral care are the people that are choosing these children. So the work that I'm doing is really targeted to the children. What I have noticed is there's a lot more boys taking part in these sessions within school that would have more of taboo to do it out of school. Some of them are school refusers, and they're coming in on days that they don't usually come in, because they're doing something that's safe and fun, because it is a fun session. And so the schools are noticing that those children that are having these sessions are becoming more engaged, and their mindsets are changing. Next slide, please. This is one that is something that all of us have had to consider in our sessions. It's a really big thing now. I was watching a BBC documentary the other day, and they said 1 in 7 children are neurodiverse. And as a class teacher, I definitely felt that was more realistic statistic. And that comes with complications and challenges. as we know, many children who are neurodiverse do suffer with anxiety, and I would say that the majority of the children that come to my sessions are neurodiverse, and they don't access those big sports clubs because they are too loud, they are too busy, and they are too competitive for some of the children. So I'm sure you have all had experience of the fidget toys and the stimming, and just for them to be in a place where if they want to stand up and move, they can. Like, that's really important. We're talking about movement, but some of these children can only concentrate when they are moving, and that's been a really important place for them to be, where they can just be themselves and not be judged. Next one, please. Another thing that I found really helpful with the anxious children is giving them lots of different opportunities to express themselves. Not everyone is a talker. I often offer the children a chance to just do literally out of 10 how they're feeling that day, which is particularly with the sort of teen age, is a really good way to just notice where they're at that day that I'm teaching them, and then I can adapt what we're doing together to help them to overcome whatever they're feeling. But like I say, some like drawing, some like working in small groups, some want me to go and talk to them one-to-one. So that expression is really important, and the variety of being able to do that has been really important. Next slide. When we first started doing movement in my sessions, the children could barely talk, let alone throw anything or be part of anything. They were so anxious. And I just want to draw your attention to the bottom left side. This was very recently, and the change in their confidence to be able to move, be around other people, express themselves from where we started has been immense. I've been working with these children for 15, 16 weeks now, and I get a lot of joy out of looking at their faces, because that was not where we started 15 weeks ago. So some lovely pictures there of the boys and girls. Next slide, please. So just things that I've learned doing this as a mentor, like I said, that attachment, that belonging, which we've already spoke about, has been a really, really important element of what I've been teaching, allowing the children to feel like they've got a place and they can talk in a safe place. I found that children of the same ages have worked much better. Sometimes the mix of ages makes that very difficult for the older children to open up to the younger children. And for me, I've been fortunate enough to work in very small groups, and with the children I've worked with, that's been really important. Yeah, next slide, please. And that's it. Just on time.
Perfect. Thanks, Abby. We haven't had any questions today. Everyone's obviously done such a good job of explaining everything. People might be saving it for the breakout rooms, maybe. But thanks, that was really useful, Abby, to hear your experience of daily feeling or kind of working with an anxious cohort. And it seems like it's been a really impactful program. So that's really positive.
Yeah, and I'm so grateful for the behind the scenes of Active Ethics, you know, their support and the extra funding and the qualifications I'm gaining and experience I have. So thank you to them too. Yeah.
Active Ethics getting a big shout out there. I just have to say a big thank you to all our speakers today. We're going to move into breakout rooms, so you may see some of our speakers within our breakout rooms. Others may have to drop off, but a big thank you from me and all the Active Partnerships for coming along and giving your time to present. I found it really useful myself, and hopefully others on the call have as well.